Hi, thanks for joining Woodworking Masterclass. I'm Steve and welcome to my workshop. This season we're making two boxes. One is a solid timber box with a raised panel lid and the other one is a plywood and veneer box, and there are two totally different techniques with construction. Last episode we veneered up some boards for the plywood box and we did all the routing and machining we needed for the solid timber box. So now's time to take it out of the press and we'll see how it went. I use that wax paper lunch wrap, and this is the reason why. See how easily it just peels off. You know, when I started years ago, we used newspaper and it would take you hours to clean the newspaper up. So that's the go, wax lunch wrap. It doesn't matter if some stays on. So when it's all unwrapped, that's what you'll have. A top, two ends, two sides, and a base. I don't know if I mentioned before, but these sides are done in one piece and these two ends were done in smaller pieces. The only reason being I had scrap ply and I didn't want to waste it. But if you can use a wider board, it's a lot easier to work with. Okay, now the top and the base we won't be needing for a while, so we'll just move all that off to one side. This is a box I make a lot of, so I make some templates, and the way I do my templates, I just draw all the measurements I need and make little jigs, which we'll cover later on, and mark all the markings. So they're all the markings I need for the timber box, and that's all I need for the veneer box. So now I've got to cut up the sides of the veneer box. So we'll go over to the bandsaw and line that up with the one that I've got set for the width of the sides. Plain one edge flat, so you've got a nice reference point. By the way, if you're worried about that, it's no need to worry because down the track that'll all disappear. So I'll just cut this up. And trim the other one to size. So now I've got two faces, a rear and a front, that are cut to the right width, and two ends. Now they're the right width, but they're not the right length, but we don't worry about the length of those yet. Now's the time to cut the front and the back to length. And the way I do that, again, I've marked on my board the width of the piece that I need. So I'll just go over and dock these off. Okay, now they're docked to length. We put them up against the template, you can see they're the right size. The other thing we have to do now, I'll put that away because I'll lose it otherwise. It's a good idea if you can put all your parts for the one project into a satchel or an envelope. That way you know where they all are. Now, the construction of this box, as opposed to the timber box, is a lap joint. So what we've got to do is cut two rebates in the side here and down the bottom, because like the timber box, I'm having a recessed base. And it has to be the width of what the sides are. So grab a marking gauge. You right, Bob? You should see what he's doing there. He's just destroyed a sanding block. You're a good boy, aren't you? Set this to the width. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit wider. And then mark on the inside of the two faces and also along the bottom, as well as along the bottom on the inside of the two ends. And if you were watching last week, what we did before we actually did that, if I'm jumping the gun, is you've got to look at the veneer and work out which is going to be up and which is going to be down. For me, I think that looks better with that dark line up there, so I'll mark that as the base. And again, I like that white section up the top, so I'll mark this as the base. And that's personal preference. There is no hard and fast rules to it. What I'm going to do is cut on the table saw some just lines, saw lines down along those marking gauge lines that I made, and then I'll take the rest of the waste out with the router. The reason I cut down with the saw first is because then you don't get tear out in the veneer. So we'll just go over to the saw, we'll mark those, we'll go over to the router. I'll be using a straight bit, and then we can cut all the rebates. Okay, let's go. And as you can tell, I've done some saw cuts over the saw and taken a lot of the waste out. Now I'm just going to clean these pieces out, and then we'll put it over the router to clean it up. Okay, as you can see, we've now got all the rebates cut. What you didn't see, and what I did do, was I cut these sides to length. Now the way you work that out is, you know what size your box you want the depth. In my case it's 230 mil. So what you do is get a ruler, measure how much meat you've got left here, which is 3 mil. So that means between the two of them that should be 6 mil. So if I take 6 mil from 230, that'll give me 224 mil, and that's the width I cut these to. So when it's all joined together, the distance from face to face should be 230 mil. Okay, now I'm asked about how do you put boxes together? What special clamps do you need? I'm going to show you the easiest way I've ever seen of putting a box together, and it's so versatile and it's pretty inexpensive as well. So here goes. First of all, we need some glue. Then we need some of these. By the way, they're called bench dogs. You can buy them or you can make your own just using bolts. And when we're putting the glue on, I don't want any glue down here. I just want it on the two ends and also on the ends of the end. Let's get some glue. And some glasses, because I don't want to glue my fingers to it. Glue both portions. Now we've got that all nicely glued. Let's take a little bit off there. Here's the best clamping method I've ever found. It's called a rubber band. And all you do is place your bits in between the rubber band. Push it down, make sure it's flat. Push the dogs down. Maybe we need another one. Say one more for luck. Press that down on your bench so you know it's all square top and bottom. Get a hold of a square. Make sure it's square inside. And then we'll just put that and wait for the glue to dry. And I'll catch you after the break and we'll start working on the panel top for the timber box. Okay, see you soon. Hi, welcome back. Well, that's it for the veneered box. Last week, what we did was we joined two bits of timber together to make the raised panel. And it's very, very high figured. And I've got a friend who makes extraordinary hand planes and he guaranteed me he can plane it with a hand plane. So come with me and we'll go over and meet Terry Gordon. Let's go. I feel quite privileged today. I'm standing next to the man behind H&T Gordon Planes, Terry Gordon, and in my opinion, Australia's leading plane maker and tool maker. Terry, thanks for taking the time out to have a chat with me.
No worries.
Mate, I have a look at all the tools you've got on this bench and it's quite impressive. There's dado planes, smoothing planes, marking gauges, spoke shaves. How long have you been making planes?
Around about 19 years now.
Okay, now I notice you've got really unique angles on the planes as opposed to, say, the metal bodied ones.
Yeah, that come about when I was starting to make my own furniture. I found the metal plane would tear the timber on this type of curly grain.
Yeah.
So, to cut a long story short, when I was in Malaysia with the Air Force, I was doing some work with the local cabinet makers, and they had planes with higher blade angles. So going with the grain, any angle works, but when you come against the grain, the lower angle can get under and tear the grain. So these guys were up higher angles, and that started me thinking. When I got back home, I started to experiment, and 60 degrees appeared to be the best angle for a strain.
And that blade is substantial. I don't know what the weight of that is, but that would be heavier than my normal blade.
6 millimetre thick.
Yeah. And is it high-speed steel or mild steel?
We use two types of steel. One's high-carbon tool steel, and then a high-speed steel, particularly if we want to use the blade as a scraper on really cranky timbers. So that's an option. You can use the plane bevel down or bevel up as a scraper. Okay,
well, actually there's an ulterior motive. Why I wanted to talk to you, as well as discuss your tools, which we will later on, is I'm making a box and I've got some really high-figured quilted maple, and I've got a smoothing plane which I bought from you about 5 years ago, I think, and I can use it, but I thought, well, what's the chance of getting the master to show people how to use it?
Sure.
Terrific. All right, well, I'll step back and I'll let Terry show you how his plane works and the best way to use it for best effect. So, Terry, it's all yours.
Okay. First of all, you just have a look, see if there's any general grain direction. It really probably won't matter which way we plane this because the grain is all over the place. So first of all, I'll take my smoother. This time I'm going to put it in bevel down. We use a little block of wood to help us set the plane up to make it easy. My job's to tap that wedge in the middle, and that'll bring the blade through nice and even. That looks pretty good there. We'll give it a try. We may have to do a small adjustment. And I've worked out as high on those sides, so I'll plane that part first. I can see already the grain's coming up pretty nice. I'll just try it the other way just in case it is slightly better. I think it'll be best this way. And start looking at your shaving. Is it too thick? I might just back the blade off slightly by thumb on the wedge and a light tap there, and that'll draw that blade back slightly. Away we go. Very fine. I might just bring it up a tad. So I can't get to the middle yet because the sides are still a bit high, but I can see that grain's come out really nice. Just go a little bit more, just to make it a little bit faster. And when you get cranky grains like this, don't push your plane too fast either. That can make a difference in the finish that you get. Now, once I've got it reasonably level, I can work from one side to the other. So, overlapping my cut. It's starting to look really good now. I'm just looking for any pieces to tear out. There's a little bit in this spot here. You can see that's what you're looking for, that beautiful full width shaving, nice and fine. And as I get towards the end of the planing process, if there is any little bits of micro tear out, I'll get rid of that by just backing the blade off slightly. So I'll just bring that blade back once again, thumb on the wedge, light tap there. And you're really fine shaving for finishing off.
Mate, I'm impressed. That is amazing. And you did that on a wobbly bench. Imagine what you could do on a bench that's solid. Well, it's been a pleasure, Terry. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I'm back to the workshop and see what Bob's eaten, and I'll see you back in the shed. Hi, welcome back. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that segment as much as I did. Terry's an absolute master with those planes. I bought one about 4 or 5 years ago and I can use it, but not as well as he does. But what we'll do now with this piece of timber that he planed is go over to the router and router a profile on it. Now it's got a profile, what you can do is sand it. By the way, if you don't have a router with a profile cutter, that's fine. There are many things you can do. You can use a spoke shaped around the edge, or you could use a block plane, or you can get a scratch stock. So you're not just locked in with a router. You can do these panels with whatever tools you have available. You might find after routing you've got to do a fair bit of sanding, and I know I'm going across the grain here, but sometimes routers leave black marks and you've got to get all those out. And then when you've got it sanded, this flies in the face of convention, but you know what I think about water. Give it a good lick of water. Two things happen. One, you actually get to see what the grain looks like, which is pretty extraordinary. And two, as soon as you wet it, you'll feel the grain start to rise underneath your fingers. Wipe that off. Now that's the purpose for doing it. A lot of times you can do a really good job, and then when you go to stain the job, all of a sudden the timber furs up and you have to sand that back and you lose a lot of colour. So it's a good idea when you're staining or finishing, always give the timber a good lick of water and then rub it back and sand it back with 150, 220, 240 and finally about 400. It depends on the timber. Some timbers you've got to wet once or twice, others maybe half a dozen times. So I'll see how I go with this one. All right, well I've wet this panel about 6 times now and I've just finished it with some 400, and if I wet it again, no fur is going to come up. And what I'm going to do with this is actually stain it before we put the box together, and I'll explain why when we're doing it. But that's the panel done. Quite nice and smooth, so we'll put that to one side. Now the ends, which we had previously machined with the round over on the inside, a slot to take the panel, and by the way, we'll just do a test fit, and that fits quite nicely. And then the rebate for the base, and the base we veneered the same way as we did the veneer box. Now we have to cut it on the mitre. Now you might have a drop saw, you might have a table saw, you might have a mitre box, you might have one of these. It really doesn't matter what you use, but whatever you use, make sure it's sharp. That's better. I like these because, as I said last episode, even if all the power goes out, it's still going to work. So we'll cut a mitre, and then we cut it to length. Clean that up with a bit of sandpaper. Rid of all the dags. The other thing I do whenever I'm mitering a box is I glue the ends. And the reason I do that is because it seals the ends, and when I actually glue it together, It gives me a much stronger joint. So we've got all these cut and mitered and all the ends are sealed. The slots, we've done a test fit with the top. We'll just see if it's all ready to go. So what we'll do, put the bench dogs up, grab the box clamps, the way I do this is you only have 3 sides up. Put the top in, then put the last one in. And there we have. Just make sure all the corners line up nicely. If there's any gaps in the corners, you might just have to trim a little bit of that side of the panel or this side. Now, an important thing when we're gluing a solid timber box together is put a bit of glue underneath the panel and the top here. What that does, it holds this in position so if the panel is loose and rattles, it won't rattle, but it allows for expansion and contraction either side. That's why it's important to have a little bit of clearance on those slots that we cut. Now that's ready to go. I think we can glue it together. But before we do, one very important thing. I stain this, and the reason being, if you put a box together with a sliding panel and it's not stained, if it's wet weather, the timber would have expanded. So in the cold weather, when it contracts, you'll have a white line and you won't be able to stain down there very well. So put a bit of stain on the panel before you put it together. The stain I use, by the way, is Van Dyke crystals. It's a water-soluble stain and very nice to use and pleasant colour. Right, so let's just glue it up on the edges. Okay, so I've got all the bits glued. Just move the stain over there so I don't knock it over because I'm bound to otherwise. Pop the dogs up. Lucky band. Always wear glasses when you're working with elastic bands too, because if they snap they can cause serious eye injury. Slide the panel in. And the final face. Whoops. And then when that happens, you look at your director and you say, "I'm sorry boss, can I do it again?" There we go. Put the dogs down. Grab a couple more bands. Once that first one's on, the rest of them are easy. I believe these are 107s and you can just get them from an office supply place or newsagents. Grab the square again. Make sure it's nice and square inside the box, which it is. Push it down. Make sure you're flush here on the top. And there you have it. So we've got 2 carcasses glued up, the veneer and ply, and also the solid timber one. So next week we'll do some more on them. Thank you for joining me so far. This is Steve, pulling the shed door down for another week and saying remember to keep it sharp, but more importantly, keep it safe.